companies of all sizes, from very early stage startups through to multinationals. So what I want to do now is take a closer look at 15 of our clients and share with you how we won those accounts. And you can see here that I've ranged the accounts from left to right, from those worth less than 100K to those worth more than 500K. So I don't like pitching. I especially don't like giving ideas away for free. So of those 15 accounts, there's only one that was acquired through a free creative pitch. But it's a big one. It's worth around £750,000 at the moment, and it's still growing. And it's one that we won several years ago with a free creative pitch for what was at the time a 10K account. And we probably spent half the available budget just doing the pitch. That's certainly not something we'd do now, but we took a gamble, and in this case, it paid off. So I'm much more comfortable with unpaid creds pitches. I think it's perfectly reasonable for an agency to be expected to present their credentials in a competitive environment. That said, it's a waste of everybody's time if the client invites everyone and their auntie to prepare a presentation. So I'm always very mindful of how many other companies there are in the frame before we commit to the effort involved in a credentials pitch. So of the 15 clients here, a third were acquired through unpaid credentials pitches. From the left, we've got an NHS trust, a major broadcaster, a university, a company that provides access to universities for overseas students, and a startup. And the startup, which is the other in the 300K to 400K band, came to us with a mobile app idea, which we designed, built, and took to market. We were one of the more expensive companies in the frame, but we won the account on the basis of our user-centered design process and technical expertise. So the next section is creative paid pitches, and these don't seem to come along very often, but I really like paid pitches. They show commitment from the client, and usually, because the client doesn't want to spend too much time on the pitching, too much money on the pitching process, there aren't many other competitors in the frame. And we won another major broadcaster through a paid pitch. So inbound inquiries that don't require a pitch in order to convert are great. Unfortunately, we win a lot of work that way at Corporation Pop. As you can see, a third of these clients came to us with a problem, like the cut of our jib, and didn't ask us to pitch for the account. On the left, we've got a couple of agencies. We're working with one at the moment to build a series of HTML5 games for a large multinational. And for the other, we handled the technical build of a mobile game in the health sector. The education client on the left is one which we've just started working with, and we'll grow that account over the coming years. As we move across to the middle, the other two are both startups, one in the health sector and the other in food and drink. And both of those startups came to us with back of a fag packet ideas. We helped them develop those ideas into market-ready products. And the food and drink client, we saw them through to a 5 million Series A funding round, and then advised them on how to grow their own in-house technical team. So finally, the final way in which we've acquired these clients is through referral, and this is the best when you've got one of your existing clients recommending you to another client, and you don't have to pitch to win the account. And we've won a fifth of the accounts here in that way. So if you remember that 10K free creative pitch that we did some years ago, that built up into a £750,000 account. Well, that referral led to an account which is currently worth over 400k and is still growing. And that health tech startup I talked about on the last slide, that led to another significant contract with a training provider in the cyber skills sector. So back to our friend Sun Tzu, opportunities multiply as they are seized. So I'm sure any of you involved in the sales process will be familiar with the concept of hunters versus farmers. At Corporation Pot, we fall fairly and squarely into the farmers category. We don't hunt new clients, investing lots of time and money chasing the elusive quarry. Instead, we nurture our clients and grow them over time, focusing on long-term relationships. And I don't know if any of you have come across this book. It's called The Win Without Pitching Manifesto by Blair Enns. If you haven't read it, download it to your Kindle and have a read. It'll cost you about £6, and you can read it in a couple of sittings. This is the manifesto, essentially. I think it's a pretty good template for rethinking the way you acquire customers. And for me, there are 3 especially important points. The first is to specialize. When you're perceived as a specialist, you can sell your services based on the value of your expertise rather than your ability to undercut your competitors. The second is to really understand the client and their proposition before you propose a solution. And in a pitch situation, this is albeit impossible. You can't conduct the amount of research required to inform a proposed creative solution in a pitch situation. And if you think you can, then you're not doing enough research. And then the third, and I would argue probably the most important, is to not solve problems you aren't being paid to solve. So when we engage with new clients, we always start with a paid discovery phase. And only once we've completed discovery are we in a position to be able to give them an accurate estimate for design and build. And that discovery allows us to do all of the research necessary to propose the best possible solution to their needs. Okay, so I've talked a lot about my dislike of pitching and how most of the time we avoid it, but sometimes you have to commit free time and resource to win a customer. But how do you decide which customers are worth fighting for and how time and therefore money, how much time and therefore money you've got to allocate to the process of winning them over? So we used to pitch a lot more than we do now, and 7 or 8 years ago I devised a tool to help me decide whether or not a pitch was worth going for. I snappily called it my pitch decision tree, and this is it. It's looking a bit dated now, but I still use it when I'm considering whether or not to enter a pitch contest. So let me run through it with you. So the very first question is to understand whether the pitch is paid or not. So let's assume in this case that it's paid. So is the fee that you're being paid adequate compensation for the time you will spend preparing the pitch? If it is, then it's a no-brainer, you should go for it. But if it isn't, then you need to ask some other questions. So questions like, how many other companies have been invited? If there's more than 2 others, you need to decide whether or not the value of the potential win justifies the effort involved. And I should say some of the metrics here are a bit out of date. These days, I want the value of the contract to be at least 15 times the value of the pitch work to make it worth going for. So if it's a paid pitch, it's relatively straightforward. But what if it's an unpaid pitch? So then you need to ask a lot more questions. The last unpaid creative pitch that we did was this time last year. And I'm going to use that as an example. It was for a large, I won't say who they were, but it was for a large interior fittings company who required an augmented reality mobile application and complex integrations with back-end systems. The contract was worth about 300k with ongoing work thereafter that. So I used my pitch decision tree to decide whether or not we would go for it. The first question was, does the brief match our experience? Well, absolutely, it matched our experience. So that was a yes. Was it an open tender? No, it wasn't an open tender. 6 companies were invited to a creds pitch, and then 3 were selected for a creative pitch. Was the value of the contract worth more than 10 times the amount of effort we planned to put into the pitch? Yes, it was, definitely. And were more than 3 companies invited to pitch? Well, more than 3 were invited for the creds pitch, but not for the creative pitch, so it passed on that basis. That led us to, sorry about the continuity here, but I couldn't fit it all on one slide. That led us to no, which was go for it. But if more than 3 companies had been invited to pitch, then you'd have to follow the other branch and decide on that basis. So as I said, the pitch decision tree is a little dated now in terms of some of the metrics, but I find it a really valuable tool. And very happy to share that with anyone after the presentation. So did we win the pitch? Well, sadly not. We came second, which just goes to reinforce my disliking of free pitching. So that's me. That's my thoughts on pitching. Do feel free to link in with me, follow me on Twitter, or visit either the Corporation Pop or the Exploro website. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and say thanks very much.
Dom, thanks very much for that. I mean, I think there's lessons for pretty much everybody as far as that goes in having a process as opposed to just working off gut feel. I mean, how long? I mean, you mentioned it before, but how many years have you been using that tool now?
So I designed that tool in 2013, so about 7 years. But given the infrequency of the pitches we do, Steve, I've probably only used it a dozen or so times.
So how did it feel when you then found yourself actually making the decision to go for a pitch? Did it sort of justify the reasoning behind it all over again, or did it make you rethink your process?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, with all of these things, it helps to reinforce a decision. I would probably always let gut feeling win over, but having that pitch decision tree in the background helps me have confidence in a decision as to whether or not to go for an opportunity.
But that's really important in and of itself, though, isn't it? That, you know, it's still, even with all this thought behind how you're going to deal with the pitch process, gut feel isn't displaced by any of this thinking.
Absolutely, yeah. And sometimes, you know, you may have a bad feeling about a prospect, or you might think that you know, a client would be such a great client to work with, that regardless of how many other companies have been invited to tender for the work, you're going to go for it. So yeah, I mean, you should always let gut feel win, I think.
But still, I would imagine relatively few and far between where you're willing to throw out all of that thought and all of that endeavour and years of experience just to let your heart rule your head as far as that goes.
I mean, apart from anything else, Steve, I think you cannot, and I sort of hinted at this in the presentation, you cannot, in a pitch environment, understand everything you need to know about a client to deliver a piece of work that matches the brief. You have to do a lot of research, and that has to be paid because it's an incredible amount of work. So I'm sure you wouldn't do all of the research necessary for a complicated court case just to win a client, Steve. I wouldn't
be surprised. But that's lawyers. But I think that's a really, really interesting point around discovery. And you know, still an awful lot of people maybe see charging for that as a bit of a dirty word. Maybe, you know, it's a conversation that's hard to have, but ultimately I think, you know, everybody's got to recognize that what clients pay for is your time and the output of that time. And if they haven't come up with a brief that you can understand, or if that brief is as static as it appears to be, then they've got to understand that the secret sauce that you're adding to them really is going to be through part of that insight, isn't it? And that, I suppose, really underpins the reasoning behind having the tool to begin with.
Exactly, and I think that plays to Blair Enns' first point in his manifesto, which is to position yourself as an expert. And if you do that, then people come to you for the value of your expertise, rather than because they're looking for the cheapest solution provider.
Well, Blair Enns and Daniel Priestley would very much agree with you. Dom, thanks once again for a really insightful presentation. And the other reason we're going to move on is because we have another one. Rachel has been waiting very, very patiently over in her corner of the Zoom meeting. And Rachel and I had a chat yesterday about what we were going to talk about today. And I think apart from the theory about what she's going to talk to you about, there's some really valuable lessons here in terms of being willing to think on your feet. I'm not going to use the phrase unprecedented times there. I've used it, somebody hit me. But obviously the situation we're in has challenged an awful lot of assumptions, even when, what Rachel and her team do is really forward thinking, is different maybe to the way some agencies look at what they do. But I'm not going to trail it anymore. Rachel, over to you.
Okay, right, bear with me. I hate this bit. Don't know why, but sharing my screen on Zoom still terrifies me. Okay, so is that okay? Can everyone see?
We can.
Good. Right, so let me tell you a little bit about KW Digital first, then I'll tell you a little bit about me, and then we're going to look at lots of slides with graphs on about the in-housing trend and what we as an agency have decided to do about it. Because it definitely is a trend that we're seeing happening through research and also in our existing client base. So KW Digital are a performance marketing agency. So by that, I mean, we basically do SEO and paid advertising. They're our main kind of focuses in terms of services. But we've chosen to really specialize in data and insight analysis, which has put us at a slightly different place to other agencies that we might work with on client accounts, because we kind of end up having the job of looking after all the KPIs and the tracking of performance data. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but we're a team of 20 people. We've grown steadily over the last 5 years. We actually have our roots in the manufacturing and engineering sector, which I suspect is what made us so focused and transparent with kind of tracking performance and predicting results. I also come from a family of accountants, so they've been really, really helpful with the financial modelling that we do on our client accounts to predict results. And I suppose that's why we also invest really heavily in R&D, because we like to make sure we're doing research and development on an ongoing basis, so we can, one, claim nicely for our R&D at the end of the year, but also because we think it really sets us apart from the competition. So here's a little snapshot of the team, the brilliant team that I work with, which I wouldn't have survived the last year without. So here is this is what we decided. It was actually after coming to a Bulletproof event with Sarah McKenna, was doing a talk on strategy. And I left that event, I think it was early on this year, maybe January. And I left that event feeling like we didn't have a strategy in place. I don't know if anyone else attended that. But I felt that as we were growing, we grew quite quickly, I think as a lot of agencies tend to, but our strategy wasn't really right. So we were focused on growth, like headcount, turnover, number of retained clients. And it wasn't really where I wanted to be. So I wanted to focus on what we were actually about, so where we were different. And as I said, we were excellent at data and insights. So we got to the point with a few of our accounts where we were predicting download KPIs or revenue KPIs to the point where we were within 1% accuracy of the projections we put forward. And we decided that was really valuable, because what that allowed us to do was to give our marketing managers who we were working for a lot of control over their digital marketing spend. So they were obviously reporting into their boards and whatnot. So that was what we decided our strategy was going to be. And we focused everything on that. So we invested in technology. In fact, here's how we did it. The next slide. So we had a deep understanding of industry averages, but we also collected all our own industry averages. So we'd run A/B tests all the way throughout the month and all of our client accounts, and then summarize them all at the end of the month and get to the point where we knew we kind of could predict what we were going to achieve. And then we'd weight that based on, you know, obvious things like demographics, seasonality, etc. But we really decided to give the time and the space to kind of play to those strengths. So we actually we hired like a data and insights manager to look after that side of the business. And I really do think it took us to like a strong place from a strategic perspective. But coronavirus hit, and all of our, well, not all of them, but a lot of our brilliant clients cut spend, cut projects. And, you know, we were already talking to a lot of our clients about where, like, you know, where they were, why they were going to, like, what they were going to do with their marketing spend in 2020. And although none of our clients were actually doing it, there was a lot of talk about, you know, oh, we'd like to bring some people in-house, like, you know, what do you think you could work better if you had more kind of digital skill in-house? And for us, the answer was always yes. I'll just run through a little bit about me as well, because I think it's important to the presentation. So these are my two little kids, Charlie and Georgie. So Charlie turned 5 in lockdown, and so did my business. So along the way, I've had to balance a lot with these two, because they were basically born at work, lived under the desks, raised by my staff, as we've kind of spent a lot of time growing over the years. And I'm also an identical twin. So the one with the baby in the hand is my twin, and I'm the one with the bigger baby in my hand. And I think the why this is important is because I think family is really important to me for a start. So I think, you know, it's always about, I mean, you've always got to build an agency that suits your work, that can suit your life. If you're going to have an agency, it takes up a lot of, everyone will know here, it takes up a lot of your energy and your time. And for me, I wanted to build an agency where I wasn't reliant on that kind of feeding the beast scenario. So, you know, you win clients, you increase your turnover, you therefore increase your headcount because you need to service that work. You therefore increase your turnover, you therefore increase your headcount. And I could just see it just getting bigger and bigger and bigger to manage. And I think because of like my family and my kids and the fact that I wanted to have a bit more time, it really pushed me to like think about how I could pivot and how I could change what I was doing that was going to suit me in the long term. And also the final slide, I'm really interested in like health and well-being, and like, you know, anything that kind of is I'm one of the annoying person that's always got the healthy lunch. And I think I wanted to bring that to the business and bring that to the workplace, because when you are, I suppose, employing quite a lot of people who are busy too and are trying to juggle all of life's demands, I think working in an environment where mental health and fitness and well-being is taken seriously is important. And so I was stuck in a situation where I had a growing agency that I loved, but it was taking more and more of my time and energy. We had clients who were great, but would also pause us like that as it happened when it came to coronavirus, which I don't blame them for, but, you know, it was a bit of a shocking situation. And then also this interest in like health and well-being and how we can improve that. And I thought, well, how can I build this business or build this life that kind of incorporates all three? So what we started looking to as a team was when we had a little bit more time when coronavirus, the pandemic first hit, we started looking at the shift to digital and what that meant. So obviously, you know, the high streets were closing down, businesses couldn't operate profitably, couldn't operate at all. And so we looked into the shift into digital, and what we saw was that most businesses were devoting like 60% on average of their overall marketing budget to digital. And we also saw within our own client base, and we surveyed them and asked them and, you know, chatted to them, we saw that actually it was up there with about 80% with some of the clients that we were working for, that overall expenditure was going on digital marketing. And when we looked at working out like the shift, like rise on rise each year, how much gets shifted to digital, we saw that really that was going to increase that shift by 5 years. So we knew that we were kind of in the right industry, for a better way to put it. And we looked in detail, and you know, we are your typical agency. So anyone listening to this, please don't feel that I've got a bad vibe towards agencies. We are this agency. So what we saw was that businesses have a marketing manager in place, and they're outsourcing digital activities to several different agencies. So you might have your design agency, you might have your PR agency, you might have your tech agency, all the rest. So there was often a few agencies involved, and rarely did and these businesses, like, digital is central to their success. So without digital, they wouldn't be in the market. But they have very, very few specific digital skills in-house. And what we found was that our marketing managers that we were working with, or sales managers, were spending less time on strategy than anything else. And they were spending more time trying to get the agencies to work to the same KPIs. And to understand what the business's objectives were. So, like, if they had a campaign coming up, we might have 3 all agency meetings just so we understood the purpose of that campaign. And often, I'll be totally honest, there'd be times where we'd be sat through and we think, oh, 3 meetings in, because it was just another client to get to look after. We found that tracking and attribution was notoriously difficult, as all agencies report in their own way, and we were guilty of this as well. We reported very much in our own way. And importantly, actually, when you stuck your agency fees, so we would obviously put projections forward, and we'd have like the revenue, like the paid advertising spend, and we'd work out return on advertising spend and return on investment for our clients. But actually, when you put the agency fees in there with the agencies that they were working with, the actual return on investment actually became very difficult to achieve. And so we were faced with all these problems that we thought, how can we address this on behalf of our clients? Our clients felt that growing digital skill within the in-house team was absolutely what they wanted to do, but saw it as a real big challenge to address. And we found that actually, as well, like, reassuringly, they did see that buying in, like, the niche expertise that we could provide, so whether that was paid advertising or SEO or social media, that it was actually paramount to their competitive advantage. So even though they wanted to bring it in-house, they knew that actually it's important to have the creative thinking and other skills, which I'll come on to, within the in-house team. But it was often like the top level strategic bit that was missing, and that was the bit that the digital marketing manager or the marketing and sales manager, or whoever it was, found it difficult to dedicate time to. So we did a lot of research, because, as I said, we're good at data and insight, so research was what we did best. And the consensus really was that in-house is the direction where it's all going. So the Dentist Agency Network surveyed senior people within brand organisations, and 58% said they are likely to add programmatic advertising in-house in the next 2 years. And the main reason cited was that brands had enough of the broken and less transparent agency models. So when I was talking about reporting on your own KPIs, and often it was a result of a brand safety crisis. So that's where the agency had taken what they thought was the brand's messaging or the brand's objectives and portrayed it in their own way, which was actually slightly different. And then, on and on it goes until you're actually delivering a message that isn't totally relevant at all to what the brand wants to achieve. Value for money was a big one. So I think agency fees are getting higher and higher, and brands believe that they can have, good internal support for that fee. And I think a big one was agility. So if you've got, an in-house team, you can respond to consumer demands quicker. And you can basically, if you need to get all hands on deck, it's not relevant on whether your agency's got time to get all hands on deck. Take this week, Black Friday in our world is horrible. Like, we haven't got time for any client. Whereas if we were an in-house team, we could obviously be focused and dedicated on that client. So, just to summarise, the drivers for in-housing were mainly increased transparency, cost saving, and greater agility. And we also looked at what the top digital hires were for 2020. And although, there's quite a lot on here, it's kind of across the board. I mean, actually, it's strangely where we're sitting, which is like this side of the graph, SEO and paid advertising. It's not as high, but really across like design, data analysis, automation, development, kind of producing content, all of those skills were like big hires for internal teams in 2020. And the main benefits that people felt from in-housing after being surveyed were, like, just to summarise, were better brand consistency, which comes back to that brand safety crisis that I just alluded to, cost saving, better control over campaigns, improved decision making, and better internal knowledge and skills to help the business in the long term. So less short-term strategy, but more long-term focus, which I think is important. So, we were kind of speaking to our customers, making our own observations and doing the research, and we were finding exactly the same responses from everything that we looked at. But the reality is that it's not that easy to bring an internal team into place. So often it doesn't live up to marketers' expectations. The biggest thing, I think, is capital investment and also a lack of support and buy-in from board members to bring in internal teams, because obviously, there's always something else to spend the money on, and you can outsource that, and the specialists are there, etc. So there was, some challenges and barriers put in place. So in terms of the top barriers, what we wanted to do was look at these barriers and see, we know that the brands are feeling it. We know that they want to bring people in-house, and we know they've got barriers. So how can we provide solutions to those barriers? So lack of internal support, recognize that, lack of existing talent and skill. And what we mean by that is to actually do the recruitment, selection, training of the in-house team, communicating purpose and buy-in, and lacking the confidence really to be able to take the leap and sever your agency, because you can't have both. So sever your agency relationships and stand on your own 2 feet. And in terms of the skill gaps, if we knew what the skill gaps were, we wanted to know what they were so we could basically plug them in our solutions that we put forward. So digital marketing knowledge and qualifications, it's quite an easy one to fix. Creative thinking, less easy, but things that you can do to help. Organisation skills, for us that's easy. Systems, processes, industry experience, and we thought with that, if you had a senior person involved, like a consultant within the team, then that can be plugged. So we started putting together a roadmap of what we would want to do. So another thing that's worth bringing up here is omni-channel marketing. So omni-channel marketing, I'm sure everybody knows what this is, but it's basically looking at how using cross-device you're looking at channels across devices and seeing how you can talk to the consumer at all stages of the way. So we saw this as key to our future. So what this quotes from Google, so 90% of multiple device owners switch between an average of 3 per day to complete a task, which is crazy but true. Businesses that can help their customers complete those tasks when and where they want stand to gain a piece of the 1.8 trillion that cross-channel sales are predicted to reach that year. Now, I'll be totally honest, up until this point that we looked at this, we weren't really looking at cross-channel attribution or cross-channel tracking at all. So when we would put out a campaign, we wouldn't see how we wanted perhaps a different asset or a different creative or a different message on a mobile versus a desktop, and what stage of the funnel those people are at. So this became a real important focus for us as well. And I think working with other agencies in our network as well to integrate that data and that messaging and that audience targeting to really deliver like an omni-channel solution. So we banged on about this quite a lot. We wanted to focus really heavily on educating senior managers. So what we did is we actually trained some of our staff in how they can talk at board level, which sounds simple, but actually to be communicating to people at board level, you do need to have understanding of financial statements and how businesses operate at a more global scale to get credibility. Because if you don't, then you're just a digital marketeer, and actually you don't really get the credibility that you need to help influence decision. So we put some of our senior people through training to basically have that knowledge. We asked if we could take the reins at setting and defining the KPIs across all channels. So we worked with agencies to put the dashboards in place, because if we could solve that problem straight away, then at least there would be more time to basically be more productive if we had that transparency across all channels. We started to put together company-wide training programs. So not just talking to maybe the graduates or the younger, newer digital marketers coming through, but also at top level too, so the senior management. So they don't need to know how matching types or Google AdWords needs to work, but they do need to understand how to interpret data and what the important KPIs are and what they mean. So we started to train at every level at the company rather than just at the junior level. As I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, we look to reduce risk by doing very, very good, strong financial modelling. So we would use a lot of industry averages and a lot of our own data to put forward several versions of what could happen with different spends. And that always provided a lot of confidence that allowed people to think, right, well, if we can, we've done sensitivity analysis here, we can be confident about that, let's give it a go. And we demonstrated a lot with research and case studies with other clients about how successful it had been. In terms of training and empowering in-house teams, we put together these 12-month digital transformation projects, which I'll give you a little view of it's not a pretty slide because I didn't have time to recreate it. I just screenshot it, but I'll show you like what a kind of a 12-month digital transformation project looked like for a typical client. A really heavy focus on what we call the RAS side of things, which is the research, audit, analysis and strategy. So instead of just spending the first month, an agency would typically spend the first 4 weeks on that. We would be putting 3-month projects forward that ran alongside of other activity. So we could really start to put together really robust strategies that like looked at all the channels and cross-device, like I said. We actually skilled ourselves up in the recruitment and the selection process, and we partnered with several recruiters to allow us to be able to run the recruitment and the selection process to build in-house teams. And I think the one that's been the most painful, but definitely the most rewarding, has been secondments from our own team. So we've actually been providing digital account managers to go in and act as, you know, the assistant to their digital senior, their sales and marketing director, and actually build up those digital teams with them. We did a lot of work, we're running a lot of workshops and events. Obviously that's harder at the moment, but we hopefully will be sorted out in time. And going back to the health and fitness slide that I brought in as well, and the wellbeing, we actually did a package that incorporated employee wellbeing and research and development activities too. So helping them identify like what digital activity would qualify and be eligible for research and development claims, and also how we can start bringing a better kind of, I don't know, like mental health to the workforce. So a typical, it's such an ugly slide, but forgive me for that. So the typical like items that would be included in the research, audit, analysis and strategy phase were like gathering information and setting the directions. And then what we would do is we'd start getting all channels working individually and in harmony together. So the blue is like a lot of what we would do, like, and the red is a lot of like the KPIs that we'd be looking to like monitor and impact at that time. And then we'd move after that stage, we'd move into more of a consultancy type package where we'd be looking after the audits and analysis, the strategy setting monthly task lists for the team to help with that organisation and that multitasking and prioritisation that agencies are so good at. We'd do all the evaluation reporting, we'd set the testing regimes, we'd carry out maintenance activities, and we would be writing processes and procedures for that team to follow if they needed to change what they were doing. And in terms of the kind of more like what I would call the softer side of it, we looked at the health and wellbeing. So we helped them develop an employee wellbeing program and development of personal development plans with like the key people that we brought in. We identified lots of skill gaps. We helped with the recruitment and placement, secondments. We provided virtual digital directors. We did a load of training, just all the time, training. And we're in the process now of building like our own training school where we can offer that kind of to the wider market, but that's a few months off yet. And we worked as well, we would either bring in or provide our own kind of coaching sessions aimed at health and wellbeing. And we'd do like practical workshops and teach kind of what we know as an agency, like what have we learned, because agencies are just the best at prioritising, multitasking and being productive and efficient with the time. Like I don't think there's any other people like them that have worked in agencies. So that's essentially what we did. And I suppose that is how we pivoted that period, because now our clients look totally different than where we were headed, which was your typical kind of retained fee clients. And now we've got more longer term, like high value, but less of them 12-month projects that are mapped out for the first time, I think, than we've ever had in the 5 years that I've been doing it. So that is the end of my presentation. I've no idea if that was 20 minutes or not, because I don't think you ever remember to time yourself. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions, feel free.
Nobody's counting you down, Rachel. That was fantastic. I mean, so going back to Dom's presentation before, I suppose the ability to have a decision tree and know that you're going to stick to it and know that those are going to be your decisions about whether to pitch is one thing. And how much confidence did you have in where this change was going to lead you and the position it was going to lead you in once you got to the end? Or is it still ongoing?
It's still ongoing, so we've still got to change. So we've done more like pilot testing it really. So we've worked with it. We've worked with that kind of roadmap with a few clients now. And now we need to make the leap where we update all our website and messaging and everything like that. And it does make me nervous because I don't want to be critical of agencies and say that there's no place for agencies, because there very much is. So it's just getting that messaging right to say, look, what we want to do is help build your in-house team, but still do the creative and the strategic element of it, because you know there's no way that can just all be brought in-house. It's just impossible. And so yeah, it's a work in progress, but it definitely helped us. It just helped us in the time to know that we were actually with the trend rather than against it.
I suppose, when you were first selling that trend and the need to evolve, did everybody come along on that journey with you, or did they just want to kind of stick to the, well, you know, if it's just churn, then we know the money's there, rather than moving towards real value add the way you have done?
Yeah, so we've got 20% of our clients that just want your typical kind of do your paid advertising, do your SEO, and that's that. We're never going to bring it in house. But the 80% of our clients, some have done it a lot on a large scale, and we're recruiting and for them now. Others have done it slowly, so they might have brought in, you know, 2 graduates that we then look after.
So again, is this where you thought you'd end up when you first opened an agency?
I don't know. Do you know, I need to spend more time planning where I want to end up, because I can never answer that question well. No, I thought we'd always been working at the consultancy side of things, because I really like doing consultancy, and you know, I'm going to do what I like doing, aren't I? So I thought we'd always end up there. But it's only, I think, after doing it for 5 years that I thought, I can't do this forever. I can't run an agency forever, and I need to build something that actually has a bit more inherent value in it. And if you've got a training school and the ability, you know, where does it go? You know, in theory, you could actually work with freelance consultants as well under your training school, under your umbrella, and do it that way.
But of course, what you've both done, what you and Dom have done, is spend an awful lot of time building something unique that then has a different kind of value that then hopefully clients see a different kind of value in.
Yeah, exactly. Like the data and insight stuff that we do and being experts in that, and then the projections are kind of led the way, for us to be more setting the direction when it came to KPIs across the business, across the whole digital arena. Because I think because we spent so much time and money investing in that, it actually kind of got us a place at the table to talk about how we think they should move as a business going forward.
Right, so we've got a little bit of time left. If anybody has any questions, do put them in the chat, or unless anybody on the end of the line wants to unmute themselves and raise a question directly.
If anyone's brave enough.
Or is everybody just kind of starstruck by both of you? I think that's entirely possible. I think both presentations packed an awful lot of information in, but I think more than anything else, you know, the insight that then comes out of that. It's one thing to have a slide deck that talks about it. It's another to hear both of you tell that story, and it's, you know, it's an amazing thing to hear.
Yeah, good.
Everybody's very quiet.
Steve, can I just say that if anyone wants my rather old and dog-eared pitch decision tree as a PDF file, I'm really happy to share that. So maybe if I could share that with Bulletproof, and then if anyone wants it, they can just ask you for it. Would that work?
That would be great. Mike has already very helpfully volunteered it in the chat anyway. So it's good that you're granting us that license. Thanks very much, Dom.
Hi, my name's Simon. No major question, just wanted to say thank you both very much. Really interesting insights. And it's nice that you've not only had a plan, but you've had the courage to go with that plan. Because sometimes you can plan to your heart's content, but taking that leap with all the planning in the world sort of takes an act of faith. So really good presentations, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You see, now we have 4 minutes left, but that kind of feels like a really good note to end on, doesn't it? I think unless anybody, I mean, I'm sure if anybody has any questions, we can collate them afterwards. But Sim, obviously, thanks for your contribution. But we've had you for nearly an hour, and unless anybody's got any objections, I'm sure you'll all be thinking of putting Christmas trees up and
I'll just respond to Sue. Sue asked a question saying, "Do we enter competitive pitches?" So do you want me to just answer that?
Yeah, by all means.
No, not really. We've grown very much through referral and recommendation. So we've never actually, in fact, I've never entered a competitive pitch. No, but Dom, your decision tree was great. I don't know if I'd have the courage to follow it though, but I could try. But no, we've never done any competitive pitches.
Oh, there we go, John. As ever, John, thanks very much for your question. Yeah, we're as grateful as you are for the discussion. Dom, I don't suppose you got any questions coming directly to you through the chat at all?
To be honest, Steve, I've not been looking at the chat.
I think you'd know about it if you had, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. But I think really, as I say, we're going to share some content after the fact. If we were in a room, I'd invite you to give a round of applause to everybody, but I'm not going to do it myself because it makes it sound like a seal. I think just to close, both thanks very, very much for sharing everything you have with us. It's been an inspirational listen. I know everybody's going to have got a lot out of it, and it's a hell of a high to go out on with our last event of the year. We're going to be getting details out about what's coming next very shortly, and some more content out after that. Just out of interest, is there any way, if people did want to contact you guys after the fact, can they find you on social? Can they get you an email? What's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn for me. LinkedIn, although not with increasingly desperate sales emails asking if they can get to the top of your inbox, yeah?
I know, it's bad, isn't it? Yeah, I suppose LinkedIn for me as well, but I think my name's different. Yeah, it's Rachel Kirkwood-Wilson on LinkedIn.
Well, I brace yourself, both of you, for a massive avalanche of LinkedIn requests after that. Many of this audience. Guys, we're not going to see you before, but listen, have a fantastic Christmas. We hope everybody, you and yours, is bearing up okay in these times, which I'm not going to apply an adjective to. Have an amazing Christmas in you, and we're going to see you all in 2021. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.